My name is Dorothy Chen and I'm 66 years old. What happened to me sounds impossible. At my husband Walter's funeral, something changed everything. While everyone cried around his grave, my phone buzzed. The message made my blood run cold. I'm not dead. Someone is lying to you. I typed back fast, my fingers shaking. Who is this? Is this a joke? The answer came quick. No joke. Watch Marcus and Thomas. They want you gone. My sons. The message was talking about my sons. I looked up at them standing near the casket. Marcus wore a black suit that looked too expensive. Thomas kept checking his watch like he had somewhere better to be. Something felt wrong about their faces. Their smiles looked fake, like masks hiding secrets. For 42 years, Walter was my everything. My best friend, my partner, my reason to wake up every morning. We met when I was 24 in the small town of Riverside. We grew up just blocks apart but never really talked until one summer day. I was selling flowers at the farmer's market to help my grandmother pay rent. Walter fixed motorcycles in a tiny garage his uncle gave him. We didn't have much money, but we had something special. Real happiness. The first time he talked to me feels like yesterday. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was walking home in my old blue dress and shoes with holes in them. He came out of his garage with oil all over his hands and gave me the kindest smile I ever saw. Hey Dorothy, he said quietly. Want me to fix your bike chain? I didn't even have a bike, but I said yes just to keep talking to him. That afternoon turned into walks by the river every evening, then promises to always love each other, and finally a small wedding with just our closest friends. Those first years were tough. We lived in a tiny apartment with walls so thin we could hear our neighbors talking. When storms came, water dripped through the ceiling and we'd put buckets everywhere to catch it. But we laughed through it all. Walter worked 12-hour days at his garage. I made dresses for the women in our neighborhood. When Marcus came into our lives, I thought my heart would explode from joy. He was the most beautiful baby with Walter's nose and my curly hair. 2 years later, Thomas arrived just as perfect as his brother. I gave them everything I had, skipping meals so they could eat more, wearing old clothes so they could have new ones. Walter was an amazing dad. He'd take them camping in the mountains every summer, teach them how to build things with wood, and read them stories every single night. I cooked their favorite meals, sewed patches on their torn jeans, and held them when they had bad dreams. We were happy together, or that's what I believed back then. As they got bigger, things started changing. Marcus, being the oldest, always wanted more than we could give. Even as a little kid, he'd ask why we didn't have a big house like his friends, why we couldn't go on fancy vacations. Thomas copied everything Marcus did, following him around like a shadow. When Marcus turned 18, Walter offered him a job at the garage, but Marcus said no in a mean way. I don't want dirty hands like yours, Dad. I'm going to be rich and important. Those words broke Walter's heart, though he never told me directly. I'd find him sitting outside late at night, looking up at the moon with the saddest face I'd ever seen on him. His boy had rejected not just his work, but everything Walter stood for. Years went by, and somehow Marcus actually became successful in the business world. He got hired at a big company that sold houses in the city. Thomas followed right behind him. They both started making lots of money, way more than Walter and I ever saw. First, I felt so proud. My boys had escaped the struggle we lived through and built better lives. But slowly, that pride turned into hurt. They stopped coming to visit as much, and when they called, the conversations got shorter and shorter. When they did show up, they arrived in shiny new cars, wearing fancy clothes, talking about investments and real estate deals we couldn't understand. They'd look at us with this weird expression, like they felt sorry for us but were also embarrassed. Mom, Marcus told me one day when he bothered to stop by, "You and Dad need to move somewhere nicer. This place is falling apart and looks terrible." He was right about the house being old, but it held everything that mattered to us. It was where we raised our boys, where we celebrated birthdays and holidays, where we grew old side by side. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Walter, who always understood people better than I did, would tell me, "Dorothy, money changed our boys. We're not good enough for them anymore." I didn't want to believe him. I kept making excuses for why they never visited, why they forgot our birthdays, why they broke their promises. They're just busy building careers, I'd tell myself. Someday they'll remember they love us and come back. But deep down I knew Walter was right. We had lost our sons long before Walter died. I just didn't know how much they had turned into strangers. Everything got worse when Marcus married Victoria Sterling, a woman from the wealthy part of the city who never tried to hide how much she hated our simple life. The first time he brought her home, she wore high heels that got stuck in our dirt driveway and a white dress that probably cost more than our monthly rent. "So nice to finally meet you," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, barely shaking my hand. Her eyes looked around our house like she was judging every crack in the wall and stain on the carpet. During dinner, Victoria barely touched the chicken and potatoes I spent all afternoon cooking. She pushed the food around her plate and took tiny bites, eating almost nothing. Marcus looked nervous the whole time, apologizing for things he never cared about before. "Next time we'll take you guys to a restaurant," he whispered to Victoria, probably thinking I couldn't hear. But I heard everything. Each word felt like a knife cutting my heart. Thomas, meanwhile, stayed single but acted just as distant as Marcus. His visits became rare, and even when he came, he was always rushing to leave. He spent the whole time staring at his phone, making business deals even while we were trying to talk to him. "Mom, I've got to go," he'd say before the visit even really started. "I have an early meeting tomorrow that I can't miss." Our Sunday family dinners disappeared. Christmas became awkward and uncomfortable. My boys would bring expensive presents we didn't want or need, stay for a couple hours, and then leave looking relieved to get away from us. Walter and I grew old with just each other for company. He kept working at his garage even though his hands hurt from arthritis. I kept sewing dresses even though my eyes weren't as sharp. We survived on our small income, too proud to ask our rich sons for anything. "You know what the saddest part is, Dorothy," Walter said to me one evening as we drank tea on our porch. "It's not that they have money now. It's that the money made them think we don't matter anymore." He was absolutely right, like he always was. My sons hadn't just gotten richer. They had changed inside their hearts. We weren't their loving parents anymore. We were an embarrassing reminder of a poor life they wanted to forget. Things got even worse when Marcus bought a huge house for $200,000 in the fanciest neighborhood in the city. Thomas did the same thing soon after, buying an expensive apartment that cost $150,000. Suddenly my sons owned more money than Walter and I could imagine in our entire lives. "You two should sell this old house and move into a senior living place," Victoria suggested during one of her rare visits. "There are some really nice places for older people. You'd be much happier there." The word senior living hit me like a punch. After 40 years of building our home, after raising these boys with every bit of love we had, they wanted to stick us in a home for old people. "We don't need that," Walter said with all the dignity he could find. "We're perfectly fine right here in our own house." But I saw the look on Marcus and Thomas's faces. They agreed with Victoria completely. To them, we were a burden, a problem that needed to be fixed in whatever way was easiest for them. That's when the pressure really started. Marcus showed up one afternoon with papers in his hands, documents he had prepared without even asking us first. "Dad, Mom," he said with that fake smile he had learned to wear, "I've been thinking about your future. This house is maybe worth $15,000 tops. If you sell it, I can add some money so you can move somewhere better and safer." For us, there was nowhere better than the home where we'd been happy for so many years. But Marcus only saw numbers and dollar signs. Besides, he kept going, "I think Dad should stop working at the garage. He's 70 years old now. It's time to retire and rest." Walter looked at him with the saddest eyes. "Son, working isn't something that hurts me. It's what keeps me going, what gives my days purpose and meaning." "But you could get hurt," Thomas added, backing up his brother like he always did. "At your age, even a small accident could kill you." Their words sounded caring on the surface, but I felt something darker underneath. An impatience, an urgency that scared me even though I couldn't explain why. The next few months were tense and uncomfortable. My sons increased the pressure for us to sell our house. They brought real estate agents to look at it without telling us they were coming. They had people assess its value without our permission. They kept talking about what would be best for everyone, but they really meant what was best for them. Listen, Marcus said to us during a particularly awkward dinner at our house. Victoria and I have decided to start a family soon. We're going to need financial help with all the baby expenses. If you guys sell the house and move somewhere smaller, that money could be like an early inheritance for us. An early inheritance? He was asking for our money while we were still alive and healthy. The nerve of that request left me completely speechless. Walter stayed calm, but I saw his jaw clenched tight. Son, when your mother and I pass away, everything we have goes to you and your brother. But while we're still living and breathing, our choices are ours alone to make. Don't be stubborn and difficult. Henry cut in with a harshness I had never heard from my gentle boy before. You're both old now. You can't keep holding on to the past forever. That night after they left, Walter and I stayed awake talking until the sun came up. For the first time in our whole marriage, we discussed the scary possibility that our sons weren't the good people we thought we had raised. Something's very wrong, Dorothy, my husband told me with worry in his eyes I'd never seen before. This isn't just about ambition or impatience. There's something dark and dangerous behind all this pressure they're putting on us. I had no idea how right his words were. I couldn't imagine that my own sons were planning something that would destroy our lives. I didn't know that the tragedy coming wasn't an accident or bad luck, but a carefully planned plot by the two people I trusted most in the entire world. The last real conversation I had with Marcus was 3 weeks before Walter died. He came alone without Victoria and looked more serious than usual. Mom, he said, sitting at the kitchen table where he'd eaten breakfast thousands of times as a kid. I want you to know that no matter what happens in life, Thomas and I will always protect you and take care of you. His words made me feel better at the time, but now remembering them by Walter's grave, they send chills down my back. Why did he say no matter what happens? What did he know that I didn't? The accident that changed everything happened on a Thursday morning. Walter had left early for the garage like he did every single day for more than 40 years. I was in the kitchen making his favorite lunch, fried chicken and corn, when the phone rang with a sound that made my heart race. Mrs. Chen, a stranger's voice asked. This is Riverside Medical Center calling. Your husband has been in a very serious accident. You need to get here right away. The words mixed together in my brain like a bad dream. Everything stopped. My legs felt like water and I had to grab the counter to stop myself from falling to the floor. What happened? Is he breathing? Is he going to be okay? He's in intensive care, ma'am. Please come as fast as you can. The drive to the hospital felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My neighbor Betty had to drive me because I was shaking too much to even hold the car keys steady. The whole way there, my mind refused to accept what was happening. Walter was always so careful, so precise with his work. How could something like this happen to him? When I got to the hospital, Marcus and Thomas were already standing in the waiting room. That surprised me because nobody had called them yet. At least not from me. But in my panic and fear, I didn't think too much about that strange detail. Mom, Marcus said, giving me a hug that felt genuine. Dad is in really bad condition. The doctors say one of the big machines at the garage blew up. He has bad burns all over and his head got hurt really badly. Henry's eyes looked red from crying, but something about his face felt off to me. He seemed more worried and nervous than actually sad, like someone waiting for test results rather than someone suffering because his father might die. Can I see him? I asked desperately. Only family members, one person at a time, and only for 5 minutes, the nurse told us. When I walked into that intensive care room, my heart broke into a million pieces. Walter was connected to so many machines and wires I couldn't count them all. Bandages covered most of his face and arms. I could barely recognize my husband. His breathing sounded wrong, mechanical, kept alive by machines that beeped constantly in the quiet room. I walked slowly to his bed and took his hand, the only part of his body that looked normal and untouched. Walter, my love, I'm right here with you. Everything's gonna be just fine. You're gonna get better like you always do. For just a moment, I felt a tiny squeeze from his hand. His eyes moved behind his closed eyelids. He was fighting hard. My warrior was fighting to come back to me. The next 3 days were the longest of my entire life. I basically lived at the hospital, sleeping in the uncomfortable plastic chairs in the waiting area. Marcus and Thomas took turns staying with me, but they always seemed more interested in talking to the doctors about medical stuff than in comforting their dying father. I overheard bits and pieces of conversations that I didn't fully understand at the time. Thomas asked questions about medical insurance and how much treatment would cost. Marcus was on his phone talking about life insurance policies and who would get the money when someone dies. Mom, Marcus said to me on the second day, we looked over Dad's insurance papers. He has a life insurance policy worth $50,000. There's also workplace insurance that could pay up to $75,000 more. Why was he talking about money when Walter was barely holding on to life? Why was he worried about insurance instead of his father getting better? I don't care about any money, I snapped at him angrily. I just want your dad to recover and come home. Of course, Mom, he said quickly, but I saw something cold in his eyes that scared me. A calculator working in his brain while his father lay dying just rooms away. On the third day, the doctors gave us the most heartbreaking news of my life. Dr. Morrison, an older man with kind eyes, brought us into a small private office. Mrs. Chen, he started gently, your husband's condition is extremely critical. The burns got infected and the brain injury is much worse than we first thought. We have to be honest and realistic about his chances of survival. What does that mean exactly? I asked, even though my heart already knew the terrible answer. It means we need to prepare for the worst possible outcome. Your husband is in a medically induced coma. We could keep him alive on machines indefinitely, but his quality of life, well, it's highly unlikely he'll ever wake up or recognize anyone again. My entire world collapsed around me in that moment. 42 years of marriage, a whole lifetime built together from nothing. And now they were telling me it was all ending like smoke disappearing into air. We have to try everything possible, I said through my tears. No matter how much it costs or how long it takes. But Marcus gave Henry a look that made me very uncomfortable and suspicious. Mom, Marcus said in a voice that tried to sound understanding and caring. We need to be practical and realistic here. Dad wouldn't want to exist like this as a vegetable. He always said he never wanted to be a burden on anyone or live hooked up to machines. Burden. I exploded with anger I didn't know I had inside me. He's your father, not a burden. He's the man who raised you from babies, who worked his whole life to give you everything he possibly could. We know, Mom, Thomas said quickly. But we also have to think about you and your future. The medical bills are going to be absolutely enormous. They could wipe out every penny of your savings account. Again with the money. Always talking about money. My husband was dying and they were calculating costs like he was a broken car to be scrapped. That night, alone in the hospital room with just Walter and the beeping machines, I took his hand and spoke to him like he could hear every word. My love, I don't know what the right decision is. The doctors say there's no hope left, but I can't let you go. I can't imagine living even one day without you beside me. Then something happened that still makes my skin crawl. His fingers moved just slightly, squeezing mine with a force that was barely there but definitely real. His lips moved like he was trying desperately to say something important, but no sound came out of his mouth. I screamed for the nurses in desperation. He's responding. He's trying to talk to me. But by the time they rushed in, Walter had gone back to his previous state of stillness. The nurse checked all the monitors and machines and shook her head sadly. Sometimes there are random muscle spasms that don't mean anything, ma'am. It doesn't mean he's actually conscious or aware. But I knew what I felt. Walter had tried to communicate with me. He had fought with everything he had left to tell me something crucially important. 2 days later, in the early morning hours of Saturday, all the machine alarms started going off at once. Lights flashed everywhere. Nurses and doctors ran into Walter's room from all directions. I was half asleep in the hallway when the noise woke me up suddenly. No, 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 I screamed, running as fast as I could toward the room. The doctors worked for 40 long minutes trying to bring him back, but nothing worked. At 4:37 in the morning, Walter was officially declared dead by Dr. Morrison. The pain I felt in that horrible moment was physical, like someone had reached into my chest and ripped my heart out with their bare hands. I collapsed next to his bed, hugging his body that was still warm, refusing to accept that he was gone from this world forever. Marcus and Thomas arrived at the hospital exactly 1 hour after their father's death. They seemed prepared for the news, like they had been expecting the phone call. They brought papers, documents, and phone numbers for funeral homes already written down. We already contacted Riverside Funeral Services, Marcus told me while I was still crying uncontrollably over Walter's body. They can pick him up this morning and start arrangements. We also called the insurance company, Thomas added calmly. The claim process is already started and moving forward. How could they be so efficient, so organized, so completely cold just 1 hour after losing their father? Something was definitely wrong. But my grief was so intense and overwhelming that I couldn't think clearly about anything. The funeral was scheduled for the following Monday morning. Marcus took care of all the arrangements without really asking me what I wanted. He chose the cheapest casket, the shortest service, like he wanted to get everything over with as quickly as possible. It's what Dad would have wanted, he said when I complained about not being included in any decisions. Something simple and quick without any fuss or attention. But Walter deserved so much better than this rushed, cheap funeral. The day of the funeral arrived gray and cold, like the sky itself was crying for Walter. I wore my only black dress, the same one I wore to my mother's funeral many years ago. My hands shook so badly that Betty had to help me button the tiny buttons down the back. "Be strong, Dorothy," my dear friend whispered as she gently brushed my hair. "Walter would want you to be strong and brave." But I didn't feel strong at all. I felt completely empty, like a shell with nothing inside. 42 years of marriage can't just be buried and forgotten so easily. Every single thing in our house reminded me of him. His coffee cup still on the table, his tools still on the workbench, his pillow that still smelled like him. When we arrived at the cemetery, I was shocked by how few people came. I expected to see more of Walter's co-workers from the garage, more neighbors and friends, more people whose lives he had touched. But it was only Marcus, Thomas, Victoria, Betty, me, and the priest. For a man who lived 70 years in the same town and helped so many people fix their cars and motorcycles, the funeral seemed strangely empty and sad. "Where are the guys from the garage?" I asked Marcus directly. "We didn't want to bother people and make a big deal," he replied quickly. Dad was a private person who liked to keep to himself. He would have preferred something small and intimate like this. But that wasn't true at all. Walter loved his community and cared about his neighbors and customers. He would have wanted them all to come say their final goodbyes. Why had Marcus decided to make everything so secret and rushed? During the service, I watched my sons with a strange feeling of emotional distance. Marcus had a solemn, serious expression that looked appropriate for a funeral, but his eyes kept glancing at his watch every few minutes. Thomas seemed restless and uncomfortable, like he had more important things to do somewhere else. Victoria secretly checked her phone behind her black veil when she thought no one was looking. This was how they were saying goodbye to their father, with impatience and distractions instead of love and grief. The priest spoke about eternal life and peaceful rest and being reunited with God in heaven. His words felt empty and meaningless in my broken, shattered heart. I didn't want Walter to rest in peace. I wanted him to come home with me, for us to keep growing old together side by side, for us to keep drinking tea on the porch every single evening like we always did. When it was time to throw dirt on the casket, my legs refused to hold me up anymore. Betty had to physically support me as I sobbed uncontrollably, unable to catch my breath. The sound of the dirt hitting the wooden casket was so final, so conclusive, so hopeless. It was at that exact moment, standing right by my husband's grave with dirt on my hands, that my phone vibrated in my purse. A text message from a number I didn't recognize. "I'm not dead. Someone is lying to you. My heart completely stopped beating. The letters danced and blurred in front of my eyes like I was hallucinating or losing my mind from grief. With trembling, shaking hands I typed back, "Who is this? Is this real?" The answer came immediately, within seconds. "Can't say my name. They're watching everything. Don't trust Marcus or Thomas." The phone almost fell from my hands like it was burning hot. Betty bent down to pick it up for me, but I stopped her abruptly. I couldn't let anyone else see those strange, impossible messages. Not until I understood what was actually happening. "Are you okay, Mom?" Marcus asked, walking over with a worried look on his face. I stared at him hard, trying to find some clue or sign on his face of what he might be hiding. His eyes seemed sincere and concerned, but now every gesture, every word, every expression felt suspicious and fake. "I'm fine," I lied, putting the phone back in my purse. "I just need to go home right now." On the drive back to my house, I couldn't get those messages out of my head. Was it possible that someone was playing a cruel, sick joke at the worst moment of my entire life? Or was there really a chance, however small, that Walter was somehow still alive somewhere? But if he was alive, who had we just buried in that grave? And if he wasn't alive, who knew enough details about our family to write something so specific about my sons? That night, alone in my house that now felt like a dark tomb, I reviewed every single detail of the last few days in my mind. Walter's accident had been strange from the very beginning. According to Marcus, a machine had exploded at the garage, but Walter knew every screw and bolt in that place. He was obsessive and meticulous about maintenance and safety checks. Plus, how did my sons get to the hospital so incredibly quickly if nobody had notified them yet? The hospital called me first. I was the emergency contact listed on all his paperwork. How did they know about the accident before I even did? And then there was all the talk about money. From day one, Marcus and Thomas had discussed insurance policies and beneficiaries like they had been waiting and preparing for this exact moment. I decided to check through Walter's papers and documents. In his old wooden desk, he kept all his important papers in a locked metal box. Insurance policies, the house deed, garage business documents, everything was stored there. I found the $50,000 life insurance policy that Marcus had mentioned to me. But there was something I didn't remember at all. The policy had been updated just 6 months earlier, increasing the coverage amount from $25,000 to $50,000. Why had Walter increased his life insurance so dramatically? He never mentioned that change to me once, and more importantly, who convinced or suggested that he do it? I kept searching through the box and found something even more disturbing and suspicious. A workplace accident insurance policy that I had no idea existed, purchased just 2 months before his death. $75,000 in case of accidental death while working. $125,000 total. A huge fortune for a family like ours, but also a fortune tempting enough for someone without any morals or conscience. My phone vibrated again with another message. Another text from the same mysterious unknown number. Check the bank account records. See who's been moving money around. This time I didn't hesitate or question it. This person, whoever they really were, knew way too much to be just a prankster or someone messing with me. They knew about the insurance policies. They knew about my sons and their behavior. They knew details that only someone very close to our family could possibly know. The next day, I went straight to the bank where Walter and I had kept our account for 30 years. Mrs. Patterson, the manager who had known us since we first opened our account, greeted me with genuine, heartfelt condolences. "Dorothy, I'm so deeply sorry about Walter. He was such a good, honest man." "Thank you so much, Mrs. Patterson. I came to check our accounts and transactions. I need to understand our complete financial situation." She pulled up our bank statements from the last 6 months on her computer screen. What I saw made my blood turn to ice in my veins. Over the past 3 months, large withdrawals had been made from our joint savings account. $10,000 in January, $3,000 in February, $4,000 in March. Money that I knew absolutely nothing about being moved. Who authorized and approved these withdrawals? I asked, my voice shaking with anger and confusion. "Your husband came in personally," Mrs. Patterson explained to me. "He said he needed the money for expensive repairs and upgrades at the garage. But I handled all our household finances and budgets. I knew exactly how much money we had and what we spent on everything. Walter never once mentioned expensive repairs at the garage, and we definitely never discussed withdrawing thousands of dollars from our savings account. Do you have the signed paperwork for those withdrawals?" I asked her. She showed me the receipts and forms. Indeed, it looked like Walter's signature at first glance, but something about the handwriting seemed off and wrong. It was too shaky and uncertain for his usually firm, clear, steady handwriting. "Mrs. Patterson," I asked with my heart pounding hard in my chest, "did Walter come alone to make these withdrawals, or was someone else with him?" She thought carefully for a moment, trying to remember. "Now that you mention it specifically, I think he came in with one of your sons once or twice. Marcus, I believe. He said he was helping his dad with the complicated paperwork because Walter had trouble reading small print without his reading glasses on. Charles. My son had been directly involved in money withdrawals I knew nothing about, using his father's poor eyesight as an excuse and cover story. But Walter saw perfectly fine with his glasses, which he wore every single day from morning to night. That afternoon, as I looked over the bank receipts and withdrawal forms again and again, I received another cryptic message. The insurance was their idea from the start. They convinced Walter he needed more protection for you after he died. It was all a trap to set him up. I could no longer deny or ignore the evidence piling up right in front of my face. The mysteriously increased insurance policies that appeared out of nowhere, the unauthorized money withdrawals I never knew about, Marcus's suspicious presence in financial transactions I had no knowledge of, his cold efficiency in organizing the cheap funeral, his disturbing calmness during his father's suffering and death. But the question that absolutely terrified me was this. If they really had planned and executed Walter's murder, how exactly had they done it, and who was sending me these detailed, specific messages? How did this mysterious person know so much about what had happened behind closed doors? The following days became a complete nightmare of doubt, suspicion, and paranoia. Every one of Marcus's smiles felt fake and calculated. Every one of Thomas's hugs felt cold and empty. Every word of condolence sounded like a lie hiding something truly sinister and evil. But I needed more solid proof and evidence before I could accept a truth as horrible and unthinkable as the one forming in my mind. My phone kept receiving messages from the mysterious number almost daily now. Go to Walter's garage and look around carefully. Check inside his desk. There are things you didn't see before. I decided to visit the garage for the first time since the accident happened. Marcus had said a machine exploded violently. But when I arrived and walked inside, I found something completely different from what I expected to see. The garage was strangely clean and organized, way too clean to have been the scene of a massive explosion. There were no burn marks anywhere on the walls, no debris or wreckage, no signs of the destruction and damage that such a serious, violent accident should have caused everywhere. Where is the machine that supposedly exploded? I asked out loud to the empty garage. I searched everywhere and found every single machine in its proper place, working perfectly fine. The welder, the air compressor, the power tools, all were completely intact and undamaged. What then had actually been the real cause of the accident? In Walter's desk drawer, I found something that sent ice-cold chills through my entire body. A handwritten note in his distinctive handwriting, dated just 3 days before his death. Marcus keeps insisting I need more life insurance. He says it's to protect Dorothy after I'm gone. But something doesn't feel right about this. I don't trust his real intentions or motivations. Below that note was another one written even more recently. Thomas brought me some official papers to sign yesterday. He claims they're to modernize and upgrade the garage equipment, but I don't understand what they're actually about or why. Why all the rush and pressure to sign right now? My husband had serious suspicions and doubts. He had sensed the evil, dangerous intentions of our sons brewing beneath the surface. But he died before he could tell me or warn me about what he suspected. I kept searching frantically and found a sealed envelope with my name written on it in Walter's handwriting. I opened it with trembling hands that could barely hold it steady. It was a letter from Walter written to me. My dearest Dorothy, if you're reading this letter right now, it means something terrible has happened to me. In recent months, I've noticed very strange, disturbing changes in Marcus and Thomas's behavior. They're way too interested in our money and assets, in the insurance policies, in us selling the house and moving away. Victoria is putting enormous pressure on them constantly. Yesterday, Marcus told me I should be more concerned and careful about my safety because at my age, any small accident could be fatal and kill me. I don't know exactly why, but those specific words sounded like a direct threat to my life. I love you more than anything, Dorothy. If something bad happens to me, don't trust anyone blindly and completely, not even our own sons. The letter fell from my shaking hands onto the floor. Walter had sensed and predicted his own death. He had seen the warning signs and red flags that I, blinded by unconditional maternal love, had completely ignored and missed. That night, Marcus came to visit me at the house. He arrived carrying a bottle of wine and wearing a smile that now seemed completely fake and rehearsed. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about your future and financial security," he said, pouring himself a glass of wine without even asking if I wanted any. "The insurance money is already being processed. It'll be $125,000 total. How do you know the exact amount already?" I asked him, pretending to be innocent and clueless. "Well, I helped Dad with all the insurance paperwork and applications. He wanted to make absolutely sure you'd have enough money to live comfortably after he was gone." Complete lie. According to his own handwritten note, Walter never wanted to increase the insurance at all. He had been pressured and manipulated by Marcus. "And what do you think I should do with all that money?" I asked carefully, watching his reaction closely. His eyes lit up with a greedy glint that gave me chills down my spine. "You could buy a smaller, cozier house that's easier to maintain, or even better, move into a nice retirement community where you'd have company and full-time medical care available. Thomas and I could manage and invest your money to make it grow and last much longer. Manage my money. Control my money. Deal my money. We just want to take care of you properly, Mom. At your age, it's very easy to get scammed or tricked or make terrible financial decisions. We understand investments and business. We could triple that amount in just a few years through smart investing. Triple my money or make it disappear completely into their own bank accounts and pockets." "Let me think about it for a while," I said, trying to buy myself more time. "Of course, take your time," Victoria said with her fake, sugary sweetness. "But don't take too long. This is for your own good and protection." After they finally left, I sat alone in my kitchen, shaking with both rage and fear. My own sons, my own flesh and blood that I carried and gave birth to, had not only murdered their father in cold blood, but now they were actively planning to steal everything I had left in the world. That night, my phone vibrated with a much longer, more detailed message than any of the others before. "Tomorrow morning, go to the police station. Ask specifically for the official report on Walter's accident. There are major contradictions and lies you need to know about immediately." The next day, I went straight to the local police station with determination. Sergeant Davis, who had known Walter for many years, greeted me politely. "The report on your husband's accident?" he asked with a confused, puzzled expression on his face. "What accident are you referring to, Mrs. Chen?" "From his garage. When the machine exploded and injured him." The sergeant checked through his files and records carefully and shook his head. "We don't have any report filed here of an explosion at Walter's garage. In fact, we don't have any report at all of a workplace accident involving your husband whatsoever." I felt the entire world sway and tilt under my feet. "But my son specifically told me it was an accident at the shop. That's supposedly why he ended up in the hospital." "Mrs. Chen, your husband did arrive at the hospital on Thursday morning, but not from any workplace accident. According to the medical report I have right here, he arrived unconscious with clear symptoms of poisoning in his system." Poisoning? The doctors found significant traces of methanol in his blood, a quantity sufficient to cause blindness, permanent brain damage, and eventually death. The hospital should have informed you about this poisoning immediately. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a workplace accident. Someone had deliberately and intentionally poisoned my husband. Why didn't anyone tell me this crucial information? I asked, my voice breaking with emotion. The immediate family members who signed the hospital admission papers requested that the information be kept confidential to avoid unnecessary speculation and gossip. They claimed you were too emotionally fragile and unstable to handle the technical medical details. The immediate family. Marcus and Thomas had hidden the real, true cause of Walter's condition from everyone. They invented the explosion story out of thin air. And they manipulated everyone, including me, to cover up a murder. Mrs. Chen, the sergeant continued seriously, if you suspect something wrong about the circumstances of your husband's death, we could open a formal, official investigation right away. I had way more than just suspicions. I was absolutely certain that my own sons had murdered their father for insurance money. That afternoon, Thomas came to the house carrying a bouquet of flowers and wearing the same fake smile as Marcus. How are you holding up, Mom? You look really tired and exhausted. I'm fine, I lied, observing and studying his every single gesture from a completely new perspective. I'm just thinking about the future and what comes next. That's really good to hear. Marcus and I have been talking a lot. We both think you should sell this house soon while it's still attractive on the real estate market. Why the rush and urgency? Well, old houses lose value very quickly, and you need liquid cash and assets. Funeral expenses, pending medical bills, all that stuff. More lies piled on top of lies. The funeral had been incredibly cheap, almost insultingly so. And there were no pending medical bills at all because the hospital insurance had covered absolutely everything. Thomas, I said, looking him directly in the eyes without blinking. You knew your dad didn't actually die from a workplace accident. For just a fraction of a second, I saw complete panic flash across his face and expression, but he recovered quickly and smoothly. What are you talking about, Mom? What do you mean? I went to the police station yesterday. There's no report of any explosion at your dad's garage anywhere. Nothing. This time, the panic was much more evident and obvious. Mom, you really shouldn't be doing things like that and asking questions. They'll just confuse you and upset you more. The grief is affecting your mind and judgment. The grief is affecting me, or you've been lying to me this whole time. He stood up abruptly and suddenly, accidentally spilling the coffee I had poured for him all over the table. I think you need to rest and calm down. We'll talk again when you're thinking more clearly and rationally. He left very quickly, practically running, but not before making an urgent phone call from the front porch. I couldn't hear the actual words, but the tone was worried, urgent, and panicked. That night, I received the most revealing and detailed message yet from the mystery number. They're coming together tomorrow to see you. They're going to try to convince you that you're crazy and mentally ill. That grief is making you imagine things that aren't real. Don't believe a single word they say. And absolutely don't take anything they offer you to eat or drink. Not anything. The mysterious message's prediction came true exactly as it had warned me. The next day, Marcus and Thomas arrived together at my house, with Victoria by their side. They had exaggerated expressions of concern and worry on their faces, and a bag of pastries from the expensive downtown bakery. Mom, we're so worried about you and your mental state, Marcus began in a sweet, syrupy voice. The neighbors have told us you've been acting very strange lately. Betty says you've been talking to yourself and that you're not eating properly. Betty never said that. It was just another lie in their constantly growing collection. Victoria brought your absolute favorite pastries, Thomas added, pointing to the bag hopefully. And we made special coffee from that expensive brand you like so much. I remembered the warning message's specific words. Don't take anything they offer you to eat or drink. Was it possible they were planning to poison me too? Exactly like they had done to Walter? Thank you, but I already ate breakfast this morning, I said firmly, keeping my distance from them. But Mom, Victoria insisted with a smile that didn't reach her cold eyes at all. You really need to eat properly and take care of yourself. You've lost so much weight since Walter died. I'm perfectly fine, I repeated more firmly. Charles exchanged a significant, meaningful look with Henry that I caught immediately. Mom, Marcus said, sitting down closer to me on the couch. We want to talk to you about something really important. Thomas and I have been consulting with some doctors and specialists about your recent behavior and mental state. My behavior. My mental state. The strange, paranoid questions you've been asking everyone. The visits to the police station. That unhealthy obsession with irrelevant details about Dad's death. It's totally normal after such a great loss, but it can be dangerous if it's not properly treated by professionals. Thomas nodded his head gravely and seriously. We spoke to Dr. Sterling yesterday. He says it's very common for elderly people to develop paranoia and delusions after losing a spouse, especially women your age going through this trauma. Paranoia. Delusions. They were accusing me of being mentally ill and crazy for uncovering their lies and discovering the truth. I am not paranoid or delusional, I said with all the firmness and strength I could gather. I'm just asking questions I should have asked from the very beginning. What questions? Marcus challenged me directly. Like why there's no police report for your father's supposed accident at the garage. Like why the shop is perfectly clean if there was a massive explosion. Like why you withdrew $17,000 from our account without telling me a single thing. The silence that followed was absolutely deafening and heavy. The three of them exchanged looks of barely disguised panic and fear. Mom, Thomas finally said slowly, those things all have simple logical explanations. Dad withdrew that money for repairs he wanted to do in secret as a surprise for you. What surprise? What repairs? He wanted to completely remodel the house. Marcus lied smoothly. He had hired some workers to fix the leaking roof and paint all the walls. He wanted it to be a big surprise for your birthday coming up. If that were actually true, where were these workers? Where were the construction materials and supplies? Why did absolutely no one in our small town know about this supposed major remodeling project? And about the missing police report, Marcus continued without missing a beat. Not all workplace accidents require an official report, especially when they happen on private property owned by the victim. More lies stacked on lies. Sergeant Davis had been crystal clear. Any workplace accident with serious injuries absolutely requires an official report filed. Mom, Victoria intervened with a voice that was sweet but condescending. We just want to take care of you the best we can. That's why we thought it would be best if you moved to a place with specialized medical attention and professional care. Home for old people. A specialized care facility, Marcus corrected quickly. For people who are going through complicated, severe grief. They have psychologists, nurses, activities to keep you busy and distracted. And in the meantime, Thomas added smoothly, we can take care of selling the house, managing all the insurance money. All those complicated, confusing things you shouldn't have to handle in your current fragile state. There it was. The complete, full plan laid out. Declare me mentally incompetent and unstable, put me in a home for crazy people, and take complete control of all my money and assets. First, they had murdered Walter for the insurance money. And now they wanted to steal from me too and lock me away. And what if I refuse completely? Ask them directly. Why would you refuse? Marcus asked with a smile that sent chills through my body. We just want what's absolutely best for you. 'Cause this is my house. This is where I built my entire life with Walter. This is where I raised you from babies. Mom, Thomas said with an exaggerated, dramatic sigh. You can't live in the past forever. Dad is gone now. You have to accept reality and move on with your life. I have accepted it, but that doesn't mean I'm going to just give away my life and my money to you. The mask of concern and care began to crack and fall off my sons' faces. Marcus got up abruptly and angrily. All right then. If you won't listen to reason and won't cooperate, we'll have to take more drastic legal measures. What does that mean exactly? It means we can start a legal process to have you declared officially mentally incompetent in court. We have witnesses ready to testify about your erratic, bizarre behavior. We have testimony from doctors who confirm you're suffering from severe senile paranoia. Doctors. What doctors? I hadn't spoken to any doctors about my mental state at all. Dr. Sterling already signed a preliminary medical report, Thomas added coldly. He says that based on our detailed descriptions of your behavior, it's very likely you need specialized care in a facility. A doctor who had never examined me, never met me, never spoken to me had signed an official report about my mental state based only on what my murderous sons told him. How much money had it cost them to buy that completely false evaluation? So you can either cooperate voluntarily and make this easy, Marcus continued threateningly, or we can do it the hard way legally, but either way you're going to get the help you supposedly need. It was a direct, open threat. If I didn't voluntarily hand over my money, they would use the legal system to steal it from me by force. I need time to think about all this, I told them, desperately trying to buy more time. Of course, Victoria said with her false, fake sweetness. But not too much time. For your own good and safety. After they finally left, I sat in my kitchen, trembling with both rage and fear. My own sons, my own flesh and blood, had not only murdered their father in cold blood, but now they were actively planning to steal everything I had left and lock me away. That night, my phone vibrated with a much longer message than all the others. Dorothy, this is Robert Harrison, a private investigator. Walter hired me 3 weeks before he died because he was deeply suspicious of Marcus and Thomas's behavior. They poisoned him with methanol mixed in his morning coffee. I have audio evidence, recordings of their conversations, planning everything in detail. Tomorrow at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, go to the corner cafe. Sit at the back table in the corner. I'll be there waiting. At last, I would know who had been sending me all those messages, and more importantly, I would have the solid proof I needed to get justice for my husband's murder. But I also knew I didn't have much time left. Marcus and Thomas had shown their hand and revealed their plan. If I didn't act fast and decisively, I'd end up locked in a home while they spent the money that had cost Walter his life. The war had begun. And even if I was a 66-year-old woman against 2 ruthless, powerful men, I had something they didn't have: the truth. And the truth, sooner or later, always finds a way to come out into the light. That night, for the first time since Walter's death, I smiled because I knew my husband had not died in vain. His caution, his instinct, his wise decision to hire a private investigator was going to allow me to get justice for him. Marcus and Thomas had seriously underestimated their mother. They were about to discover that a woman fighting for the memory of her murdered husband is a force more powerful than all their greed combined. The next day arrived filled with nervousness and anticipation. I dressed carefully, choosing my most serious navy blue dress, the one I wore for important occasions. If I was going to meet the man who could give me the answers I desperately needed, I wanted to be prepared for any revelation. At 2:30 in the afternoon, I walked toward the corner cafe with determined but cautious steps. Every shadow looked suspicious. Every person on the street could be a spy sent by my sons. The paranoia they had accused me of having was starting to feel completely justified. The cafe was moderately full with afternoon customers. I went straight to the back table as I had been instructed. I ordered a chamomile tea and waited, my hands trembling slightly on the worn wooden table. Exactly at 3 o'clock on the dot, a man in his 50s approached my table. He was tall with gray hair, intelligent eyes, and a serious but kind expression. He was carrying a brown folder under his arm. "Mrs. Chen?" he asked in a low voice. I nodded, not yet trusting my voice. "I'm Robert Harrison. I'm so sorry for your loss." Walter was a good man. He sat down across from me and placed the folder on the table. "Before I show you what I have, I need you to know that what you're about to hear and see is going to be very painful. Are you ready?" "I've been getting ready since I received your first message," I replied with a firmness I didn't know I had. Robert opened the folder and took out a small voice recorder. "Walter came to see me a month ago. He was worried about his son's behavior. He hired me to investigate them discreetly." He pressed the play button. Walter's voice, so familiar and dear, filled the small space between us. "Robert, I need you to know that if something happens to me, it won't be an accident. Marcus and Thomas have been pressuring me to increase my life insurance. Yesterday, Marcus brought me papers he said were to better protect Dorothy. But when I read them, I realized there were also clauses that directly benefited them. My heart sped up. Hearing Walter's voice was like having him back for a few minutes, but his words confirmed my worst suspicions. The recording continued. Thomas has been asking strange questions about my daily routine, what I eat for breakfast, what time I leave the house, if Dorothy comes to the garage with me. He says it's out of concern, but something about the way he asks worries me. Robert paused the recording. This conversation was 3 weeks before his death, but I have something more recent. He played another recording, this time with Marcus's voice in the background talking on the phone. No, we can't wait any longer. The old man is starting to get suspicious. Yesterday he asked me why I was so interested in his insurance. Yes, I already have the methanol. It works perfectly because the symptoms look like a heart attack or stroke. No, Mom won't be a problem. After Dad dies, she'll be so devastated that we can do whatever we want with her. Tears began to roll down my cheeks. It was the voice of my son, my own son, coldly planning his father's murder. There's more, Robert said softly. This recording is from the day before Walter's death. A new recording began. This time it was Thomas talking to someone. Everything's ready. Tomorrow, Marcus is going to put the methanol in Dad's coffee. We told him it was a special vitamin supplement a doctor recommended. The idiot is going to drink it without suspecting a thing. The symptoms will start with dizziness and confusion, then loss of sight, convulsions, coma. The doctors will think it's a stroke or heart attack. By the time they realize it's poisoning, it'll be too late. My world completely collapsed. Not only had they planned Walter's murder, but they had executed it with a coldness that terrified me. How was it possible that my sons, the babies I had nursed, the boys I had comforted through their nightmares, were capable of something so monstrous? How did you get these recordings? I asked through my sobs. Walter asked me to put listening devices in your house, Robert explained. He was afraid, but he didn't know exactly what of. We placed them on the home phone and in some other strategic spots. He took out a series of photographs from the folder. I also have this. Marcus buying methanol at a hardware store 30 miles from town. He paid with cash and used a fake name, but I have it on video. The photographs clearly showed Marcus leaving a hardware store with a small bottle in his hands. The date on the photos was 5 days before Walter's death. And this, Robert continued, showing me more documents. These are Marcus and Thomas's financial records from the last 6 months. They've been spending a lot more money than their incomes justify. Marcus owes $70,000 to a lender in the city. Thomas has gambling debts for $40,000. They were desperate. It all started to make sense. It wasn't just greed that had motivated Walter's murder. It was financial desperation. My sons were ruined and saw their father as a source of easy, fast money. Why didn't you go to the police immediately after Walter's death? Asked him. Because Marcus and Thomas are very smart. They bribed the doctor who attended to Walter at the hospital to change the official diagnosis. Instead of poisoning, the death certificate says heart failure due to complications from a work accident. Without that medical evidence, my recordings might not have been enough for a conviction. But now we have all the evidence together, I said, feeling a mix of pain and determination. Exactly. And there's one more thing you need to know. My blood ran cold. What? Your sons were planning to kill you too. Robert played one last recording, this time with Marcus and Thomas's voices together. Once we have Dad's insurance money, we need to get rid of Mom too, Marcus said. We can't risk her getting suspicious or anyone else putting ideas in her head. Oh, Thomas asked. The same as with Dad. But this time we can make it look like a suicide from depression. A widow who can't live without her husband. Nobody would question it, and the money, we're her only heirs. Everything would be ours. The house, the savings, the insurance money. Almost $200,000 in total. The recording stopped. I was shaking uncontrollably. My sons had not only murdered their father, but they were planning to murder me as well. All for money. Mrs. Chen, Robert said gently. I know this is devastating, but we have enough evidence to make them pay for what they did. What do we do now? I asked, wiping my tears. First, we need to go to the police with all this evidence. Sergeant Davis is an honest man. He's not involved in the corruption. Second, we need to act fast. Your sons are planning to have you declared mentally incompetent tomorrow. If they succeed, it will be much harder to proceed legally. Tomorrow. I intercepted a phone conversation this morning. They're meeting with Judge Miller at 10 o'clock in the morning to start the mental incapacitation process. I got up from the table with a determination I hadn't felt in weeks. Then we have to act tonight. Exactly, Robert confirmed. But first, there's one more thing I want to show you. He took one last photograph from the folder. In it, Walter was leaving a medical clinic I didn't recognize. 3 days before he died, your husband went to get a full medical exam at a clinic in the city. The results show that he was perfectly healthy. There were no signs of heart disease. His blood pressure was normal. Everything was perfect. This definitively proves that his death was caused by poisoning, not by natural health problems. That was the final piece of evidence we needed. Walter had been a healthy man, murdered by his own sons. Robert, I said, taking his hand. Thank you for keeping your promise to my husband. Now let's get justice. That same night, Robert and I went directly to the police station. Sergeant Davis was working the night shift that week, which was perfect for our purposes. When we arrived, it was 8 o'clock in the evening and the station was relatively quiet. Sergeant Davis, I said in a firm voice. I need to file a formal complaint for the murder of my husband Walter. The sergeant looked at me with surprise. Murder, Mrs. Chen. The death certificate says he died from heart complications after a work accident. The death certificate is false, I replied, placing Robert's folder on his desk. My husband was deliberately poisoned with methanol by our own sons. For the next 2 hours, Robert and I presented all the evidence. The audio recordings, the photographs of Marcus buying methanol, the bank documents showing the unauthorized withdrawals, Walter's medical results proving his perfect health, and finally the recorded conversations where my sons confessed to both their father's murder and their plans to kill me. Sergeant Davis listened to each recording with an increasingly serious expression. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair and shook his head in disbelief. This is monstrous, he murmured. Are you sure you want to go through with this, Mrs. Chen? Once we arrest your sons, there's no turning back. Sergeant, I replied with all the dignity I could muster. Those men murdered my husband in cold blood for money. They were planning to murder me too. They are no longer my sons. They are criminals who must pay for their crimes. We'll need the medical examiner to exhume Walter's body to confirm the presence of methanol, the sergeant explained. Are you prepared for that? Do whatever is necessary, I replied without hesitation. Sergeant Davis immediately called the district attorney. Despite the late hour, the seriousness of the case led the DA to come to the station personally. After reviewing all the evidence, he immediately authorized arrest warrants for Marcus and Thomas. We'll proceed at dawn, the DA explained to us. We need to make sure we have all the evidence before they can destroy any additional proof. Robert walked me home that night. Are you sure you'll be okay alone? He asked with concern. I'll be fine, I replied. After everything I've discovered, I'm no longer afraid. I have justice on my side. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed up sitting in the kitchen looking at the photographs of Walter we had on the walls. For the first time since his death, I didn't feel only pain. I felt a strange mix of sadness and satisfaction knowing that justice for his murder was coming soon. At 6 o'clock in the morning my phone rang. It was Marcus. Mom, you need to come to Thomas's house right away. Something terrible has happened. What happened? I asked, feigning concern. It's better if I explain it in person. Please come quickly. I knew it was a trap. After hearing the recordings the night before, I knew they were planning to move up their plans to get rid of me. But I also knew the police were already on their way to arrest them. I'm on my way, I lied. Instead of going to Thomas's house, I stayed in my kitchen waiting. At 7:30 in the morning, I saw from my window as several police cars headed toward my sons' houses in different directions. My phone rang repeatedly for the next hour. First Marcus, then Thomas, both with increasingly desperate voices asking where I was. But I didn't answer any calls. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Sergeant Davis knocked on my door. "Mrs. Chen, we've arrested Marcus and Thomas. They are in police custody charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder." I felt my legs tremble, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from relief. "How did they react?" I asked. "Marcus denied everything at first, but when we played the recordings for him, he collapsed. Thomas tried to escape through the back window of his house. We had to chase him for 6 blocks. That afternoon Victoria came to see me. She arrived sobbing, pleading, completely different from the cold, calculating woman I had known. "Mrs. Chen, please, you have to drop the charges against Marcus. He's not bad. He was just desperate because of his debts. This is my fault too. I pressured him a lot to find money." I looked at her without a trace of compassion. "Victoria, your husband poisoned my husband. He was planning to murder me too. There is no explanation or justification for that. But we're family," she screamed in desperation. "Think about what this is going to do to the family." "The family died the day you decided to kill Walter for money," I replied coldly. "Now please leave my house." 3 days later, the exhumation of Walter's body was carried out. The lab results confirmed exactly what Robert had discovered. Lethal levels of methanol in his system, enough to cause all the symptoms he had experienced before his death. The case became a sensation throughout the town. No one could believe that 2 sons had murdered their own father for money. The local newspapers called it the cruelest crime of the decade. Over the following weeks, more details came to light during the investigation. Marcus really owed $70,000 to illegal lenders who had started threatening him with violence. Thomas had lost $40,000 in underground gambling dens and was also facing threats. They had seen Walter's life insurance money as their only salvation. But their greed had led them to increase the policies so dramatically that it had aroused their own father's suspicion. We also discovered that the doctor who had falsified the death certificate had received $5,000 in cash from Marcus. He was also arrested for obstructing justice and falsifying official documents. Robert explained all the details of the plan Walter had made with him. "Your husband was smarter than his sons believed. He knew something bad was coming, but he didn't know exactly what. He hired me not only to investigate Marcus and Thomas, but also to protect you if something happened to him." "Did he know they were going to kill him?" I asked. "Not exactly," Robert said. "But he suspected his life was in danger. That's why we installed the recording devices. That's why we documented everything. He wanted to make sure that if something happened to him, the truth would come to light. My Walter, even in his final days, had been protecting me. He had anticipated our son's betrayal and had taken steps to ensure that justice would prevail." The trial was scheduled to begin in 2 months. Both Marcus and Thomas faced charges of first-degree murder, which in our state carried a sentence of 25 years to life. The day of the trial arrived after 2 months of intense legal preparation. The courtroom was completely full. Reporters from several regional newspapers had come to cover what was already known as the case of the killer sons. The whole town was there. Neighbors, former co-workers of Walter, even people I barely knew but who wanted to witness this historic moment of justice. I wore my best black dress, the same one I had worn for our wedding so many years ago, but which now represented mourning and dignity. Robert accompanied me, sitting by my side throughout the entire process. His presence gave me the strength to face what would be the most difficult day of my life. Marcus and Thomas entered the courtroom in handcuffs, dressed in orange prison jumpsuits. Seeing my sons like that broke my heart one more time, but I no longer felt pity for them. I only felt a deep sadness for the moral death they had chosen long before they physically murdered their father. The prosecutor presented the case with devastating precision. One by one, the recordings were played for the court. The silence was absolute every time the voices of Marcus and Thomas were heard coldly planning Walter's murder. When the prosecutor played the recording where they planned to kill me too, several people in the audience gasped in horror. One elderly woman got up and left the courtroom crying. I couldn't blame her. It was difficult to process such cruelty. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecutor said during his opening statement, this is not an ordinary case of family greed. This is a case of cold and calculated premeditation where two men decided to murder the father who had raised them with love and sacrifice simply because they needed money to pay off their gambling debts and irresponsible loans. Marcus and Thomas's lawyers tried to present a defense based on desperate circumstances and external influences, but the evidence was overwhelming. The recordings didn't lie. The bank documents didn't lie. The forensic evidence of the methanol in Walter's body didn't lie. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand with trembling legs but a clear mind. I had been waiting for this moment for months. Mrs. Chen, the prosecutor, asked me, "Can you tell us what your relationship was like with your sons before your husband's murder?" I thought I had a good relationship with them, I replied, looking directly at Marcus and Thomas. I raised them with love. I sacrificed everything for their well-being. Their father worked from sunup to sundown to give them the best we could. I never imagined that love and sacrifice would become the reason for his murder. At any point did you suspect they could harm your husband? Well, that is the most painful part of all this. I trusted them completely. When they told me Walter had an accident at his garage, I believed them. When they organized the funeral so quickly, I thought they were being efficient in their grief. I never imagined they were covering up a murder. Marcus lowered his head during my testimony. Thomas looked at me defiantly, but I saw tears in his eyes. Too late for tears. Too late for regret. The most dramatic moment of the trial came when the prosecutor decided to play the full recording of the conversation where they planned my own murder. Marcus's voice filled the courtroom. "Once we have Dad's insurance money, we need to get rid of Mom too. We can't risk her getting suspicious." A murmur of horror swept through the audience. Several people turned to look at me with expressions of disbelief and compassion. "How did you feel when you heard this recording for the first time?" the prosecutor asked me. "I realized that I had lost my two sons long before I lost my husband," I replied, my voice cracking but firm. "The babies I nursed, the children I comforted in their nightmares, had died and been replaced by two strangers capable of any cruelty for money." The defense tried to cross-examine me, suggesting that maybe I had misinterpreted my son's intentions, that maybe the grief had made me exaggerate the evidence. But the recordings spoke for themselves. Robert also testified, explaining in detail how Walter had hired him because he was afraid of his own sons. He described every step of the investigation, every piece of evidence collected, every recorded moment that revealed the truth. The medical examiner presented the results of the exhumation, confirming the lethal presence of methanol in Walter's body. He explained how this poison acts slowly, causing exactly the symptoms my husband had experienced before he died. After 3 days of devastating testimony, the closing arguments arrived. The prosecutor was crushing. Marcus and Thomas are not victims of circumstances. They are predators who saw their own parents as financial obstacles that had to be eliminated. They planned, executed, and covered up Walter's murder and were planning to do the same to Dorothy. They don't deserve compassion. They deserve justice. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. I could hear the beating of my own heart as the judge read the verdict. In the case of the state versus Marcus Chen and Thomas Chen, on the charge of first-degree murder of Walter Chen, we find the defendants guilty. The courtroom erupted in murmurs and exclamations. Marcus collapsed in his chair, finally comprehending the magnitude of what he had done. Thomas remained rigid, staring straight ahead with no expression. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder against Dorothy Chen, we find the defendants guilty. The judge proceeded immediately to the sentencing. "Marcus Chen and Thomas Chen, for the premeditated murder of your father and the conspiracy to murder your mother, I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 30 years. When I heard those words, I felt a gigantic weight lift from my shoulders. Justice. Finally there was justice for Walter. After the trial, Many people came up to hug me and express their support. Betty cried with me, not from sadness but from relief. "Dorothy, Walter can rest in peace now," she whispered to me. That night I returned to my house, which now felt different. It was no longer a place of pain and betrayal. It was my home again, the place where Walter and I had been happy for 42 years. Robert came to visit me a week after the trial. "How do you feel?" he asked me. "Peace," I answered honestly. "For the first time since Walter's death, I sleep soundly. I know he is resting because his death did not go unpunished. And the money, the insurance, the savings. I donated the life insurance money to a foundation for victims of family crimes," I explained. "That money was stained with blood. I could never have used it. My personal savings are enough to live modestly for the rest of my days." 6 months after the trial, I received a letter in prison mail. It was from Marcus. "Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that I regret everything. The money, the debts, the desperation, they blinded us. We lost all humanity. Thomas and I destroyed the most loving family in the world for $125,000 that we didn't even get to enjoy. Tomorrow I will commit suicide in my cell. I can't live with what we did. Take care, Mom. Tell Dad we're sorry we were such bad sons." I didn't arrive in time to prevent his suicide. Marcus was found hanging in his cell the next day. Thomas, upon learning of his brother's death, suffered a complete nervous breakdown and was transferred to the prison psychiatric hospital. Today, 2 years after the trial, I live peacefully in my small house. I have converted Walter's garage into a garden where I grow flowers to take to his grave every Sunday. Robert has become a close friend, visiting me regularly to make sure I'm okay. Sometimes the neighbors ask me if I miss my sons. The answer is complicated. I miss the children they were, but those children died long before Walter did. The men they became were not my sons. They were strangers who shared my blood but not my heart. I have learned that true family is not defined by blood but by love, loyalty, and mutual respect. Walter was my true family for 42 years. The friends who supported me during the trial are my family now. Justice did not bring Walter back, but it gave me peace. And on quiet nights when I sit on the porch where we so often drank tea together, I swear I can feel his presence, proud of me for being strong enough to do the right thing, even when it meant losing my sons forever.